It's the first game week and we already have humongous VAR controversy, some crazy results, some huge moments, and a cracking start to the season. Welcome to the Premier League Roundup, Match Week 1. Match Week 1 started off with the launch of the Premier League season with Manchester City away at Burnley, picking up a 3-0 victory away from home to kick off their season with a bit of a bang. And who else would it be other than a few minutes into the game, Erling Haaland scores his first goal of the season. Of course he does. He then went on to score a second later on. However, one of the biggest moments from this game was not Haaland scoring a brace, it was Kevin De Bruyne going off injured in the 23rd minute. They saw Mateo Kovacic come on in his place, and news today saying that he could be out for up to 4 months, and they are debating whether to have surgery on him. A monumental loss for Manchester City. Their midfield is going to need a bit of a rejig, ready to go this season, and hopefully they can bring him back in the second half of the season to really push for any and all trophies that they're aiming for. Burnley were always going to struggle in this fixture. It was basically the hardest one that they could have got. Man City flying after the treble win last season and wanting to back that up with a big start to the season. We did see some players that a lot maybe didn't think that we'd be witnessing starting for Man City in the opening game of the season. No Jack Grealish, no Ruben Diaz, no Gvardiol either. Cancelo is still up in the air. He may go to Barcelona, so he's still on the books right now. But as expected, it was a Man City just easy victory, wasn't it? I mean, you look at the stats here, 17 shots, 3 big chances, one of them missed, but easily way more possession, way more passes, and just having control over the game. You see here the positions that Man City have their shots from. You have a nice wide range within the box, whereas Burnley, 3 of their 6 are from basically the same position, 1 outside the box as well. But in a game where Man City's defence cost more than Burnley's entire history, it was only going to go one way. And of course, I predicted 3-0 Man City, so happy days, we get a good amount of points for our first prediction. Moving on to Arsenal against Nottingham Forest. Now, I got my result prediction right, but not quite the scoreline. Bukayo Saka and Eddie Nketiah, the goal scorers for Arsenal in this one, getting the season off to a very good start for them. Nottingham Forest at least getting a goal away at the Emirates. Not bad, considering how it could have been. They could have been absolutely demolished. So, Awoniyi, who was a doubt going into the game whether he would be fit enough to play, picking up a goal. Really good start to the season for him after a decent end to the season last year. The stats here are an interesting read in this one because Nottingham Forest actually have more XG than Arsenal. And if you've seen the highlights, then you will understand why based on the goals that Arsenal scored, especially Saka's unbelievable goal by him. But shots and stuff like that, obviously in Arsenal's favour. Accurate passes is humongous in their favour. And you can see the positions where they were taking their shots from. A lot of them were actually outside or edge of the box, whereas Forest was a bit more of a spread and they did get their goal from close range. Now, one thing that is very interesting to see, regardless of these stats, is the momentum graph. You can see the dominance that Arsenal had in this game, and this is what all of the accurate passing and the possession and all of that does for you and the chances that you're creating. However, as we all know in football, it's a sport of moments, and here are 2 big moments for Forest where they could easily have nullified all of this hard work by Arsenal, where they just couldn't quite make it count enough, and Forest could have got 2 moments out of the whole game to equalise. And so it's the quality of when you get your chances that can really make you stick out in the Premier League and also secure your place staying in the league. So for Forest, it's not bad. They would like to have maybe created a few more chances throughout the game, had a little bit more of the ball, but you're going away to Arsenal. First game of the season, you can't be expecting too much as a team that came up from the Championship in the previous season and had a decent year in the Premier League and are now trying to cement themselves in the league. You just got to take what you can get and try and build on this, get the signings and everything sorted, and try and have a decent season. Next we have Bournemouth against West Ham, and this one I actually predicted perfectly. I said it was going to be a 1-1 draw. I just thought that it was going to be One of those kind of games, start of the season, two teams that don't really look that great. They've got players coming in, players going out, and things just aren't quite there yet. Maybe in a month or two's time, once the managers have had time to gel with any changes in the starting 11s, you'll see things look a little bit different. But two slightly disjointed teams right now, both main goal really this season is stay in the Premier League and see what else you can do on top of that. So that's why I went with 1-1, and that is what we got here. Jarrod Bowen with the goal for West Ham before a late-ish equaliser for Solanke. In every other year, you'd say 82nd minute, that's quite late. But nowadays, games can go on for 100 plus minutes, so there's loads of time left. But if we scroll down and look at the stats right here, you can see Lucas Paqueta picking up the Man of the Match award on FOTMob right here. Very, very heavily linked to Man City right now. That would be a humongous loss for them. Whereas Alex Scott for Bournemouth coming the other way and joining is going to be a very nice signing for them. So still lots of time left in the transfer window for things to change. This a little bit more even than that Arsenal game, as you can see, with West Ham having a few more of these moments. And you can see out of nothing, not even the biggest moments is what created the goal for Jarrod Bowen here, and then Solanke's late goal here. Stats in Bournemouth's favour. Was that to be expected with them being at home? Maybe, just because, again, West Ham are disjointed, especially without Rice. Him alone is just such a game changer for that team and how they play their football that it's going to take a while for them to properly adjust, regardless of who they sign. They've brought in Ward-Prowse. It looks like they might not get Maguire now. It's a bit all over the place, but 1-1, decent start to the season. I don't think either team would be upset at a point. Another prediction here that I didn't quite get right. I went with 4-0 Brighton, but Luton on their Premier League debut this season did manage to snatch a goal with a late-ish penalty in this game. However, Brighton getting things underway with a goal in the 36th minute from Solly March. We had a 71st minute goal, 85th, and then Evan Ferguson with the 95th minute. Just final nail in the coffin for them right there. João Pedro starting for Brighton. There were questions of what was the forward line going to be looking like? Is Ferguson going to start? João Pedro had looked like it throughout pre-season. Would he be on penalties? Turns out he is. Mitoma Marsh, Gross Dahoud, who was a solid little pickup for them as well. And James Milner in the squad is very interesting to see. But Luton with a 3-5-2 formation, not dreadful in terms of a result for your first game away in the Premier League against a high-flying Brighton that are still on the moon based on last season. So it could have been worse. I mean, we look at the stats right here. It wasn't as if Luton didn't do anything throughout this game. I mean, the goal comes from moments where they're just not creating too much, but they've had little bits throughout the game, and it wasn't as if Brighton for 89 minutes dominated every single possession of the football. It was a little bit more balanced than that, and Luton not completely embarrassed, I think, is the main thing that some were worried about going into this game. You can see the amount of shots, though, that Brighton had, and the cluster of them inside the box, especially on this left-hand side. 27 total shots against 9. However, look at the position of Luton's shots, and this is why they have an XG of 1.48. If your efforts are this kind of area rather than pot shots from out here, then you're giving yourself more chances to score. And so if they can do that against less solid teams than Brighton, if you can get these kind of chances made against the lower teams that you're competing with to stay up in the Premier League this season, then you could actually give yourself a chance of winning some of those fixtures. So I think Luton have reasons to be positive after this game. Even if they conceded 4 goals, they still got a goal themselves. And again, it wasn't through a terrible back pass and it's your only chance of the game or stuff like that. So fair play to Luton, but Brighton, dream start to the season. Only negative is they didn't keep that clean sheet. Next, we move on to another result that I got right, just not quite the scoreline. I thought that both teams would score in this one and Fulham would win 2-1. However, Mr. Reed getting the only goal in this game means that Fulham get off to a fantastic start with still many, many questions about Mitrovic and what's going to happen with him. Still questions about the manager and some people's commitment to the club, with new talks for Mitrovic happening today with some of the Saudi teams. So questions over Fulham, but they do start off the season with a nice away win. Everton, though, it's not what they needed at all. Last season and the season before, they've barely stayed in the Premier League. Fans would have wanted to see a much more just team that looked like they want to fight and really show that passion and energy to turn the consensus around them on its head and make fans and also just viewers of them actually have some belief that they have a solid system in place with a decent manager and hopefully making something work to become a more solid team rather than scraping by for yet another year. If we go down to the stats right here, then you can see the momentum graph again. Everton having a few chances, Fulham also having theirs. And the stats are right here. So Everton with a lot more shots than Fulham in this game, 19-9, with a much higher XG of nearly 3, but no goals scored. And this is a big, big problem for them. We've seen it for the last couple of seasons that when Calvert-Lewin isn't completely fit and firing, they don't really have much going on up front. Now, I know that they have signed a new striker, but he's going to take a little while to bed in, Deitch has said. And so it might be a while before we see him starting week in, week out. And you just can't rely on the fitness, or even if he is playing, on the ability of Calvert-Lewin all that time. And so if we take a look at the starting 11 here for Everton, and you look at where the goals come from this team when it's starting, Maupay is not reliable enough to be starting in the Premier League. He could potentially be a plan B super sub where you want someone a bit more physical up front that's just going to get stuck into the defenders and let them know that he's there, like a Mitrovic kind of type of player. But as a starter with play running through him and everything like that, no. Doucouré has shown flashes of brilliance at Everton, where he has had these driving runs forward, but just has sometimes lacked that clinical edge. He did, sadly, as a Leicester fan, score the goal that got us relegated and kept them up last season. He needs to do a lot more of that if he's going to be playing in a more advanced role here. Onana is heavily linked to a lot of different teams, especially Manchester United right now. And so if they lose him, that's a huge loss in midfield because he is amazing. Garner and Iwobi. Iwobi last season had quite a different role as more of a box-to-box centre mid, a bit like a Joelinton transformation that we've seen over the last couple of years. And so you just don't really look at this starting 11 and think they're scoring goals. To be fair, Leno did have a very good performance and did make quite a few saves in this game. However, when you have that amount of chances, you simply have to score. You cannot be having that many shots and that many efforts on target without actually putting anything in the back of the net. That is a sign of a lack of clinical finishing and taking those chances. So whilst it's good that you're creating them in the first place, if you don't have the players that are able to convert said chances, it's not going to be enough. So we need to see more from Everton. Sheffield United against Palace. I actually thought this one was going to be a draw, but Palace did manage to pick up the win here. Edouard with the goal. However, it has to be said, before we say anything else, that Elise is going. He has had his release clause broken by Chelsea today, and it's looking like £35 million is going to be inserted into the bank account of Crystal Palace. And so will they go and spend that money to try and replace him, or are they going to stick with Ayew, Schlupp, Eze and Edouard as a front four this season? I feel like it would be better for them to go out and spend a bit of that cash we'll have to wait and see. A bit like Luton, Sheffield United setting up in that similar system and it just not quite working out for them. Here are the stats. As you can see, Palace dominating for the vast majority of the game, really. Here are all of the stats, 24. However, look at this spattering of shots from not just the edge of the box, but 30 plus yards out right here. There's quite a few. They did have a lot of shots from not the best angles and positions, which is why, despite 24 shots, they have less than 2 XG. So, Palace maybe need to get in a bit more scary positions for their opposition before they're trying to unleash these strikes on goal, and maybe that will provide them with some more finishing going forward, rather than just, oh, you know what, I'll have another shot from here. I know it is against Sheffield United, and maybe you're using it as disrespectful as it might sound, a bit of a warm-up game in a fully competitive setting before you go into some more difficult fixtures, and trying different things out, trying some curling efforts that maybe in a harder game you'd try that extra 1-2 or that extra little through ball, maybe. But Palace deserving of the win. GG. The shock result of the weekend came though with Newcastle beating Aston Villa 5-1. I had this one down as a draw because I thought it was going to be really hard to call going into this season. Both teams had fantastic runs last year, both ending up in Europe. Obviously, Aston Villa's happened after Gerrard was sacked and when Emery came in. There's been some big signings on both sides, players like Moussa Diaby, Sandro Tonali. But it was more Isak that got the plaudits in this game, as he does pick up a brace and does start ahead of Callum Wilson. We had Anthony Gordon and Almiron playing in this game. A lot were questioning whether Harvey Barnes would be starting, especially after his big money move from Leicester, and whether Callum Wilson would potentially go up front and Isak pushed out onto one of the wings. But no, Newcastle just all over it. So here are the goal times. Tonali scores within the first 6 minutes. However, instantly pegged back by Diaby. Aston Villa, solid signing for him. Emery has praised him a lot already. But Isak scoring in the 16th, 58th, Wilson, and then Harvey Barnes, who also assisted Wilson's goal, came on as a sub and had a very nice impact. I feel like in this system, you're going to see a decent amount of him because he's going to be allowed to run in behind, doing 1-2s and stuff like that because of the players around him and the fact that other teams are going to be marking players like Isak or whatever and not doubling up on him. The problem with Barnes that we saw at Leicester for a long time was he doesn't dare to take on a man. He is statistically one of the worst wingers in the Premier League at beating his fullback. And so if they can utilise him by doing 1-2s in behind and playing him into the space rather than make him try and beat a man, basically the opposite of St. Maximin, that's how they're going to utilise him the best. So here are the moments right here. We do see Aston Villa having some decent chances. However, there was a big injury that happened early on. 31st minute, Pau Torres came on for Tyrone Mings, who looks like he's going to be out for a long, extended period of time. So maybe it wasn't quite time yet for Emery to start Pau Torres and Diego Carlos together, and Mings and Konsa were going to be the partnership, but things are now going to have to be accelerated and will be really intriguing to see how that goes. Stats are right here. Shots pretty even, but Newcastle just having better opportunities, creating higher XG, and also being more clinical with those chances that they created, and that's why they got the 5 goals. It wasn't that Villa were absolutely dreadful going forward. At the back, they just left too much space for the Newcastle forwards to run in behind. And even the midfield, players like Tonali making these runs and breaking through the lines of midfield and defence, and the Aston Villa defenders like Mings before he got injured and stuff like that, not knowing whether to stick with their man or track the midfielder run. It was actually highlighted in a piece on Monday Night Football that you can watch on YouTube if you want to check that one out, where they actually went into good depth about exactly what I'm talking about. It feels like everyone that saw parts of this game would have seen the same thing. And so Villa's defence was the problem, which was actually a massive highlight for them towards the back end of last season. they were keeping lots of clean sheets under Emery. So that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. But Newcastle, what a start. Top of the... Let's move on to Sunday, and Tottenham let me down for my prediction against Brentford here. I thought they were going to pick up the dub here. They went 1-0 up due to a Romero header, James Maddison assist, before being pegged back by Brentford and Mbuemo, who turns out is on penalties. FPL fans, take note. Wissa got another goal before Emerson Royale with a banger from outside the box with another James Maddison, slightly dodgy, but still assist on his competitive debut for the club. Here are the player ratings. This is how it looks like Spurs are going to be lining up this season. Kulusevski on the right, Maddison as the number 10 as expected, with Son on the left and Richarlison up top through the middle. An interesting fantasy pick, 7 mil midfielder Richarlison. So if they don't go out and buy a new striker, and if they do keep this front four, could be a very, very nice pickup. But James Maddison showing his class and why he is just an absolute baller and why it's so sad that we lost him. He was always going to do well for Spurs. It looked like maybe that was going to be hindered by Harry Kane leaving for Bayern Munich, and obviously that is the big, big thing for Spurs this season. How can they do without that talisman for the first time in years and years and years? Even when he's had seasons where he's had decent length injuries, he's still banged in the goals when he's been available. So it's a really tough season for them. I'm really intrigued to see how they do. But Spurs' defence, hit and miss in this game. And as we'll see right here, Tottenham did have the majority of the chances here. They just couldn't actually convert them, especially in the second half. And here are the stats. Look, XG, 1.27. These are where the shots are from, right? And to be fair, one of their goals was Emerson with 0.03 XG. And that's fine. So you can sort of count that out. But having chances, but not in great positions, is a problem for a lot of teams. Brentford had less chances, but again, only 2 of them were outside of the box. And so you have more chances of scoring. And it's a big thing. You can have all the possession in the world. Look how many more passes they did than Brentford in this game. And you can have more shots. But their defence at times was interesting. I feel like it will be better under Ange, and now that they've got a couple of new signings, Udogie playing at left-back, Van de Ven as well, slotting in at centre-back, and new Vicario in goal instead of Hugo Lloris. It's a lot of changes for Spurs, and so it will take a little bit of time for them to all gel together, but I'm intrigued to see more, especially of Maddison. Brentford, without their star man in Tony, picking up a draw at home to a promising-looking side is a good start to the season, though. And so I'm intrigued to see more of them as well. Penultimate game, we have Chelsea v Liverpool. Now, whilst this finished 1-1, I thought it would be slightly higher, but a draw, and it easily could have been. Both teams having goals ruled out for offside from VAR for Mo Salah and Ben Chilwell, but Luis Diaz with the opener and Disasi on that Premier League debut getting the equaliser. This is how the teams lined up. Chelsea with this 5 at the back system. Chilwell and James thriving. Chukwuemeka in midfield alongside Enzo Fernandez and Gallagher, who both had really good games. Raheem Sterling, not the best, so it wouldn't surprise me if we see either now Elise if he does sign, Madueke, Mudryk, someone like that starting ahead of him going forward. But Jackson looked like a live wire and is definitely one to look out for. Liverpool, this was a really, really interesting one. Now, they obviously don't really have a defensive mid. They've tried to get Lavia, he's going Chelsea. They've tried to get Caicedo, he's going Chelsea. They've lost Fabinho, they've lost Henderson. They've even, they've just lost basically everybody. So unless you're playing Szoboszlai or McAllister as an out-and-out defensive mid, your midfield is already a bit imbalanced. You could potentially ping Trent into midfield as this new inverted fullback role that everyone seems to love. But not as much this game. Gakpo was basically playing left centre mid and it just it didn't work that well. It wasn't as terrible as it could have been, don't get me wrong. Getting stuck in a lot of the time, winning the ball back, but it just isn't his position. You have Salah on the right, Jota through the middle, and Diaz on the left. If Gakpo was playing maybe as a number 10, or even up front with Jota as the 10 in behind him, and then Szoboszlai and McAllister as 8s, really, could you play without a 6? Maybe against lesser teams, but Chelsea actually look really, really good in this game. And Poch looks like he's already getting things to tick. As you can see here, they had bigger, like dominant sections and chances that they had in the game. Liverpool were creating, but Chelsea were the better team in this game. The possession, as you can see right here, shots were pretty even, as was the XG. Big chances missed, though. 4 for Chelsea is not what you want to see. However, lots and lots of positives to take after a very lackluster season last year for Chelsea. Same with Liverpool to an extent, but if you were to say who will finish higher in the table based on that game, I'm not sure if anyone is going to say anyone other than Chelsea. And the final game of match week 1 was a robbery. Let's just put it straight. So Manchester United 1, Wolverhampton Wanderers 0. I did predict Man U to win, as did basically everybody, but it took them a long time. Wolves looked really good, / Man U defensively looked really bad. Cunha was just running through them like it was absolutely nothing this game. The defence was all over the place at times throughout this game. It was pretty crazy, to be honest with you, how average some of the players were. The midfield balance with Mount in there for Man U just didn't look good enough, really. You had Garnacho, Antony, and Rashford as a front 3, and it just, again, it didn't look right. Rashford just doesn't seem that comfortable going straight through the middle. And so if we look at the momentum right here, you can see Wolves having these chances. But Man United capitalising on this one with a big goal by Raphael Varane to get their season underway. If we look at the stats here, then you can see that the XG was actually slightly in Wolves' favour. However, this does not take into account the absolute joke of a decision that came at the end of the game. And this is our final point for this video. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. The penalty that wasn't. Very late in the game, Onana's had a great debut in the Premier League. Looked really good with the ball at his feet, made some decent saves from not the best finishing from Wolves, but still not too bad. However, a moment of madness. Looping long cross comes in towards the back post. Onana commits and keeps committing. He's not going to get anywhere near there. Makes himself huge. Absolutely clatters into the Wolves player. It's a penalty, clear as day. Not given. Goes to VAR. They look at it. Somehow still not given. Referee goes over to the sideline. Looks like he's going to look at the VAR monitor and give it because it's clear as day. But no, instead books Gary O'Neill for complaining that it hasn't been given, even though it blatantly should have. The PGMOL and John Moss have apologised basically immediately to Wolves after the game, saying it was a mistake. It should have been given. It was a clear penalty. And whilst that's fine, you've owned up to your mistake. How has it happened in the first place? This was not a contentious decision at all. It wasn't like a questionable handball, or did he just about get a nick on the ball, or did he touch a guy's leg first? No, this was a keeper completely wiping out a player after failing to claim a cross. And the officials from that game have now been dropped from the next match week in the Premier League. But that doesn't benefit Wolves. They've still lost out. They could have potentially got a point away from home at Old Trafford to start the season. Considering how much of a mess they look like they're in, that would have been massive for them. But incompetence is rife in the Premier League with the officials once again for yet another year. And the question just has to be asked, how and why? I really, really hope, as they said they could last year when Howard Webb went on to Monday Night Football, we're going to be able to hear the audio and stuff like that after games for decisions that have been made. We need, with these massive wrong decisions that you've come out and apologise for, to hear what went on at the time. How was this allowed to happen? Because to put it simply, it's a farce. And I'm sure all of you agree, we don't need to go on about it for ages. It's just the officials being poor once again. So if you like the weekly roundups, then we will be doing more of the Premier League recap going forwards and more videos coming soon. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, thumb it up, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.